Hello and welcome to this exclusive interview for ATH Insights. And with me today is a very special guest, someone who's worn many hats and excelled at all of them. Gurcharan, thus, welcome to ATH Insights.
Thank you.
In another sort of freedom, you talk about the idea of living lightly. How do you think that ideal influences public and private leadership in India today?
You know, the title of the book, Another Sort of Freedom. What is that freedom I'm talking about? I finally concluded that freedom is best expressed when you don't take yourself too seriously. In other words, take your work seriously, but not yourself seriously. If you can work in such a way that you don't care who gets the credit, you are free. And it's my also definition of a contemporary, secular, worldly definition of moksha. I've written these 4 books on Artha, Dharma, Kama, Moksha, the Purusharthas, the goals of life. And the Artha was India Unbound, which was the first book to predict the rise of India in the 90s based on the reforms, and India obliged by rising. This Dharma was the difficulty of being good, which actually went on to introduce the epic Mahabharata to people in the world because it became a global book. Kama was the riddle of desire, and the 4th is moksha, another sort of freedom. And you asked me about moksha and freedom, and essentially it's a memoir about my life, which is trying to find a struggle to find purpose and meaning in life. And we all face this.
Absolutely.
Many of us, we can be at the top of the pyramid or the bottom of the heap, but we all tend to ask in our 40s, is this what life is all about? And I've concluded that it's not about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself. There's nothing to find. So it's in a sense also the duty of all parents, teachers, to help children to find some kind of purpose in life.
Right. So, really intrigued to know which is that one virtue that you feel is undervalued today in public discourse?
Well, I think I've not thought about this, but certainly one virtue is a sense of one's limitations, a humility in other sense, that a lot of things that we think we do are really a matter of luck. I mean, I can try and take credit for a lot of things, but actually it so happened I was at the right place at the right time sometimes. And yes, there are turning around, my life. I had a promising academic career when I did philosophy at Harvard. I was supposed to go to Oxford, I had a scholarship. And then I didn't go because I wanted a life of action and not a life that was at that stratosphere of abstract thought.
Right.
So I would just say a sense of limitations, of realizing I'm not sure what I've found it. My motto is to live lightly. There's a Sanskrit word, laghima. Laghima is, Patanjali also uses it in his Yoga Sutra when he's talking about one of the siddhis, being light, living lightly. And that you get when you don't take yourself too seriously. So it all comes back in a way to this ideal. We spend our lives busy, and I've spent my life being busy, but being busy is not living your life either. Now, I'm not sure what is living your life, but we are lucky, great to be born, to be alive is a great piece of luck. I mean, just think that it took all those sperm that your father released, and one of them went out of billion, one of them went to fertilize the egg. So what luck
Right.
when you're born.
Right.
So it's the wonder of the
Right.
world that one can
Right. Right.
admire.
So, given your background in business, literature, and philosophy, what role do you believe storytelling plays today? How important is it in public discourse?
Well, India is one of the oldest storytelling cultures in the world. A lot of the stories that were told by us to us went through the Arabs, through the Islamic world, and became what in Europe Aesop's fables and the Thousand and One Nights and all. And so, if you ask me, I told a lot of stories today, and the message, it's a powerful tool for education.
Right.
In other words, you have one guy does a PowerPoint, serious, sexy PowerPoint, and then another person makes the same point by telling stories. Who do you think people will remember?
The story.
The stories they will remember. And stories like The Mouse Merchant. So I would just say that it's an undervalued art of teaching. Every teacher should aspire to be a storyteller.
Wonderful.
And I realize this because a writer at the end is a storyteller. And that's what I've realized, that you write for readers, and readers don't want to be lectured. They want to be engaged, and nothing like a story to engage people.
Right, right. So you've studied under Kissinger. It's a multipolar world that we live in today. There's the US-China rivalry, there's the India story, India's risen, and there are geopolitical shifts happening all around. What is your worldview of that space?
When I took this course at Harvard, Kissinger was the professor. It was the elementary course in international relations. And I don't know whether you know, but Kissinger's hero was Metternich. Metternich, the Austrian leader. And Metternich used to say that there are no friends and no enemies in politics, international politics. There are only interests. And a nation's primary duty is to follow its national interests. And so leaders, he said, smart leaders do not inject external things into their conduct of international policy. They single-mindedly pursue their national interest. And when he used to say that, he used to give the example of Jawaharlal Nehru at the time. This is 1960s.
Right.
And he used to say that now he injects morality, what is right and what is wrong, into international politics. And he says that is wrong because he creates uncertainty. When everybody follows their national interests, you can predict how people are going to behave. But when you introduce morality, you're introducing a wild card into the deck. And so he said it is wrong. And he also said that why is Nehru doing the job, supporting and being the ambassador for China? At that time, China was a communist country. And he says our natural ally of India is the West. And what possible gain will he get from allying with China? And by the way, when he used to talk like this, he used to point at me because I would sit in the front of the class. When he said Nehru, he would point at me as though I was Nehru and I was doing the wrong thing. So I remember it. And the reason why I sat in the front row was because Kissinger, after living in America for 30 years, couldn't speak English. He had this very guttural German heavy accent, which I couldn't understand. And so I sat in front of the class and I was his kind of beating boy. But he was right. Soon after he gave this example of China attacked India. And so he met me and he says, I told you so. So that was a lesson from Kissinger. But if you fast forward to today, I think we're kind of going backwards. Kissinger represented an ethic, a policy which was me, my country, and that's what only thing that matters. Since 1945, after the Allies defeated fascism, frankly, we have had a peaceful world. We've had a few wars, Vietnam, Korea, etc., but it's been relatively peaceful. Unlike before that, every year there was a war for hundreds of years. And so, yes, we do have a Ukraine and Gaza thing going, but this is out of the ordinary. And so all I can say is that one of the lessons we learned, the institutions that were created after Second World War were created, like the United Nations, to bring peace to the world. 5 crore people had died in Second World War. And so the world said, never again. What I'm trying to say is this notion of international cooperation, of working commonly for peace, all these are very worthy aspirations. I think now, and Mr. Trump represents the worst example of when he says, make America great again. And we say, make India great again. Well, yes, but nationalism can be toxic. Nationalism, there's good nationalism and bad nationalism. Good nationalism is about my memories of my childhood when my grandmother told me stories from the Mahabharata. My memories of going with the family to the Himalayas and the mountain peaks. So it's about our history, geography, our stories. But bad nationalism is about power. To say that we are superior to our neighbors, we are the best. That then also leads to finding in each, it has always been true, like happened in fascist Germany, Nazi Germany, you look for some enemy within. We thought after 1945, we had gone beyond that. Unfortunately, that has returned. And in a sense, it's that what Kissinger was preaching, which we thought was a good thing, but there is a higher aspiration. Actually, the EU is an example. Europe, there was a war every year, and there hasn't been a war. Germany and France are fighting every year. You can't think of a war between Germany and France.
Absolutely.
So I hope we can come back to that order.
Right. Interesting. So you've also written extensively about living an examined life. How do you think we scale that idea beyond the individual within organizations?
Well, this is really a personal quest that we all have. Because as I talked earlier to you, that all of us want to have some sense of purpose. Because the world doesn't have an inherent sense of purpose. I mean, if you're a religious person, you may think differently. But most of us, we are born and then we die. And in between is that life. And we want to live in some sense purposefully. We want to live happily. I used to always have a one-line definition of happiness. To love the work you do and to love the person you live with. One-line definition. Now, of course, I discovered these purusharthas. And you can think of these as capabilities. We all have a capability for artha, dharma, kama, and moksha. Meaning, this is very much like India. There's not one goal of life. There are 4 goals of life because we have potential, capabilities for all 4 of them. Making alive, living, the idea of desire and emotional richness and sexual fulfillment. All these are so sensible in the ancient times. And by the way, the Kama Sutra is not a book of sexual positions. It's a book of very modern book of how to behave. It's the fastest selling book still from India. in the world.
Right.
The Kama Sutra.
Right.
You know,
Right.
Bible is the biggest selling in the world.
Right.
The Gita also sells a lot,
Yeah.
but Kama Sutra.
Right.
Anyway, I don't want to get diverted, but I just want to answer your question as I examine life, that what we can do is that our institutions also, schools, teachers, parents, they can all make us, as we grow up, realize that we not only have to make a living, but we also have to make a life. And I'll tell you one quick story. You know, one of my earliest memories is when I came home from kindergarten with a report card. And it's a green card. I'm 4.5 years old, Lahore, 1947. My mother's at the door and she looks at me and she says, "Did you stand first?" And my father is nearby and he says to her, "That was the wrong question. Ask him what he likes about school. Does he like to draw? Does he like stories? Who are his friends?" And what my father was telling her, and that time this became clear to me, that there's a difference between making a living. My mother was intent, come first. You have to get a job, make a living one day. And my father, who was more relaxed, and he was thinking when he was telling her this, he was actually saying that he's got to make a life one day. And so she was telling her to relax. He doesn't have to stand first. He has to be happy and live an examined life.
On that note, Gurcharan Das, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
It's been super insightful, super resourceful, and your voice is one of the most profound ones around. Thank you so much.
Thank you.